Good morning, everyone. Officially, welcome to QAA's second webinar on generative AI entitled Chat GPT, How Do I Use It as a Force for Good? For those that don't know me, and I'm going to assume that most people don't, my name is Eve, and I'm Head of Public Affairs at QAA. So some of you may have joined our first webinar last week, which was entitled To Ban or Not to Ban. And those of you who joined us will know that our panel of speakers unanimously felt that we couldn't and shouldn't attempt to ban generative AI tools like ChatGPT, not least because it's difficult to detect them, and that will only get harder, but also because they're shortly about to be integrated into software that we use every day. So naturally, if the assumption is that these tools are here to stay, the next natural question that we should be asking ourselves is, how do we use these tools as a force for good? So in order to help us answer that question, we're lucky enough today to be joined by four brilliant speakers, some of which you will have seen on last week's webinar. So we've got Michael Webb, who is the Director of Technology and Analytics at Jisc and co-leads Jisc's National Centre for Artificial Intelligence. We've got Dr. Maha, who is a Professor of Practice at the Centre for Learning and Teaching at the American University in Cairo. Dr. Bron, a senior lecturer at the University of Tasmania, and Jack Medlin, who is Education Officer at Keele Student Union and a member of our QAA Student Strategic Advisory Committee as well. So the format of the webinar today, our speakers will each speak for about 8 minutes in turn, giving their response to the question, how do I use ChatGPT as a force for good, giving us some food for thought on that topic. Please do put questions in the chat as we go. QAA colleagues will be monitoring those and collating them for a Q&A afterwards. So we'll try and squeeze in as many of those questions as we can after the speakers have finished. We would love to also hear your thoughts and reflections on Twitter throughout. So if that's your thing, you can use the hashtag QAA_ChatGPT. That's QAA_ChatGPT. And we would love to see what you're saying over on that platform. And then finally, a heads up that we are going to be recording this webinar for future use. It will be uploaded onto our YouTube channel. Hopefully by the end of today. If not, it will be up there early next week, so keep an eye out on that. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our first speaker, which is Michael Webb. So Michael, take it away.
Hi everyone. Right, I'll just share my screen. Hopefully that's worked. Well, it's been another interesting week in the world of generative AI, hasn't it? So I'm going to kick off by talking about how to introduce new people to ChatGPT. Now, I'm aware that probably a lot of the audience here are actually like really good users, but when I talk to a more general audience, find lots of people haven't got started yet. So let's run through what I do to get people going. And I want to say it's not all just about ChatGPT. We've got Claude, Bard, Bing Chat, all sorts of things to explore. So what I typically suggest is that we start by exploring its limitations. We then move on, try something creative, and then do something else that's useful for us. So I'm going to choose using it for feedback. So I'm going to just run through 3 of those. So let's start with exploring its limitations. And the reason for this is that it's easy to misunderstand what these tools can do. So if you've got an idea of what they can't do, you can actually start using them in positive ways, making understanding what they can do. And it's got more confusing now. We've got more things like Chat, Bard, Bing. So first thing I always recommend is exploring the information cutoff date. Very basic. Ask a question like, who is the UK's current Prime Minister? If you do that to ChatGPT, the free version, it will say Boris Johnson, or the last thing I knew was Boris Johnson. Yep, and it'll tell you what its cutoff date is. If you do that with, say, Bard or Bing Chat, it can access the internet and you can see what it's doing. So it gets you a good initial feel. Next, I'd get people to explore its untruths and hallucinations. This is a useful thing to get a good understanding of early on. This might sound weird, but a good way of doing it is to say, get it to write a bio about yourself from your institution. This might just be me that thinks it's a good idea, but there's a reason for saying this. You know all about yourself. Yeah, so you can verify its facts. This will only work if there was a reasonable amount of info about you on the internet before the cutoff date, and you'll get different results with Chat GPT and Bing. So here's one I prepared earlier. So here's one for me. And I've highlighted, I won't go through all the bits, but all the bits that it's made up, and it's lots of it. And the reason this has happened is that what it's actually done is written a bio of somebody a bit like me. If you didn't know me, all looks perfectly plausible, yeah? But actually, detail, all wrong. If we had more time, I'd then move on to show it getting something right, yeah? So it's got this wrong because there's not a huge amount about me, I'm not that famous. If you move on to something much more well-known, you'll get it right. If we try Bard, Bing, it will search the internet and give something accurate. So once we got to that point, we can think, okay, let's not discard it. We can actually do lots of good things with it still. And I suggest that it's actually better to think about creative things next. So I'm going to make things a bit meta now. I, full confession, use this to brainstorm ideas for this 8-minute talk. And I just want to talk about how I'd think about doing this. So the basic mechanism would be just to say, give me ideas for a session about getting the most to Chat GPT. Thing to remember is it doesn't behave like a person. So if I said that to a person, it would start asking me follow-up questions, probably. It wouldn't just launch into the answer. ChatGPT and the like don't do that. So you'll see lots of guides on how to construct a prompt, okay? And there isn't an exact science behind this. So don't take them as absolute way of doing it. I'm just sharing a mechanism that works for me to think about it, but develop your own ways. So I like to think about breaking it down into what do I want to achieve, which is still the same, contextual information. So for this, I'd add in who the audience is. Now, I'm saying here it's people who've never used ChatGPT before that have worked in education. I know some of you have. And then constraints and other additional information. So I'm adding in, I want it to be fun and informative. I'll let you make your own judgment about that. It should last for 8 minutes. You'll find that ChatGPT's understanding of what's achievable in 8 minutes is strange, but don't matter. And I want 3 ideas. Okay, so doing that, I've broken it down. I've given it a lot more to work with. And I'll share with you what it came up with for this session. Not the whole thing, because it wouldn't fit on the screen and I didn't want to show it live in case it didn't work. But it's come up with something nice for me to work with. And as a brainstorming process, this works really well for me. I've not used the whole thing. It actually come up with something that would take about half an hour to go through. But look through, I've highlighted some bits that I've picked out as points that I want to use. So find it really useful as a process for thinking through initial ideas. I could go in, ask feedback questions. So don't forget that you don't have to just take its initial response. I actually went back and said, that's a lot for 8 minutes. I won't go through the whole thing. Can you tell me less? And it says, sure. It likes to confess it's got it wrong. Yeah. So good way of understanding how to use it to generate ideas. Last one I just want to talk about is using it for feedback. So confession, when I write, I make loads of typos and errors and things like that. My colleagues are always having to proofread my drafts and correct them for me. So I love using ChatGPT for this. Basic form, just say, proofread this, paste your text in. What it will do is it will then actually just come back with a proofread version. That's useful, but you can't actually tell what it's changed a lot of the time. You can do a follow-up question, say, what did you change? And it'll tell you, and you can start discussing with it. Again, a better approach is to think about what sort of feedback you want. So slightly different prompt, following the same format, what I want to achieve, get feedback on it. The context, I think about my audience, that's always useful, assuming you know nothing about the subject for this one. And additional information, what do I actually want to know? And I want to know if it's clear and easy to understand. So again, put that into a prompt. So here's one I was asked to provide a bit of text for another webinar I did. I fed this in. I did deliberately add some bits in to get some feedback on this one. But it's given me some really useful feedback. It's said that it's understandable. Doesn't always do that when I do it. It has told me that I've used some technical terms that perhaps I should think about expanding or explaining because of the audience. So I just find that really useful. And I do this all the time now when I write stuff and just iterate. I do get humans to read it as well, but this just speeds up the first process. So those are 3 examples I just wanted to go through. I've got one last tip, and we were just discussing this one actually between us before we went. Now, you might well find that Chat GPT is busy a lot of the time, and there are other ways to access it. One that I'd recommend at the moment is po.com. It will probably become a chargeable service in the future, but at the moment it's free and seems to be really reliable. And it's got a few advantages. It's got Chat GPT there. You can also try Claude, which is another model, start comparing it, and it gives you a tiny little bit of free access to GPT-4. So 1 a day, not very generous. So if you're frustrated at getting access to Chat GPT, give it a go. I wouldn't recommend necessarily using it with students because it's not clear that it will stay free. That I've actually managed to get through that in less than my 8 minutes. That's outrageous, is what I wanted to share today.
Amazing. Michael, thank you so much. That was so helpful just to get a real sort of foundational knowledge of the best ways to get the best out of these models. So thank you, Michael. A really great way to kick us off. Up next, we have Dr. Maha. So Maha, please take it away. And I know that you're going to talk a little bit about integrating it into learning and teaching. So go for it.
Thank you. I'll take a minute from Michael, if that's okay. All right, here's a link to my slides. I'm going to put it in the chat, and in case anybody wants to put comments on it later, or if I don't go through them all. And I like to start with Assalamu alaikum because that works whatever your time zone is. I hope you're feeling well. There's no time to ask how you're feeling, but I do want to start with this question. And what is a good metaphor for AI that you would use? My mom, who doesn't know anything about AI, says AI is like fast food. And there's so many ways that AI is like fast food, right? Like it gives you something quickly, and it could help when you're in a bind, but it's not necessarily the best thing for you. So I'm curious what you guys think is a good metaphor for AI. I'm using Slido. You can go to slido.com and put in the number code 2413815, or you can use the QR code. Or if you're having trouble with Slido, you can just type in the chat. That's also okay. I think the metaphors we use for AI says a lot about what we're thinking. Oven-ready answers, anything that eases the work for humans. Cyborg, like having an extra team member, a buddy. So these two are quite similar and inevitable. Yeah. Wikipedia on steroids. Oh, the Slido code is on the left-hand side. It's 2413815. Second brain, ready-made work, robot friend. To flower and Discworld, I have no idea what that means. Virtual assistant. Okay. Tech bro spin, useful buddy. Whoops, sorry, did not mean to move on from that. Illegal copyright piracy, yes. Partly informed friend, pick and mix, new best friend. Liquid meal replacement, dangerous unlimited thing, creepy friend. Yeah, it's sometimes a bit creepy. Overly confident teenagers. Yeah, will have access to a lot of information that gets it wrong. Yeah. Terminator is Skynet, but hopefully not. Cloning, exciting, potential to be enabling. Massive plagiarist for sure. Trying its best, a tool. Virtual smart friend, public school boyfriend. Okay. Unknown threat or potential ally. HAL 9000 brain killer. Pandora's box. I've asked this question to my students, and it told me a lot about what they're thinking about it as well. New cheat modes, teacher, copycat, annoyingly brilliant. Robot version of society's biases. I really like that. Okay, I'm just going to move on. Frozen pizza and psychoeducation. So those were unexpected. All right, so I think it's important when we're teaching about AI, and if we're going to be using AI responsibly, to recognize the inequities with AI. And we're talking about AI we've had for a long time. This is not the first time we've had AI, right? And a lot of the AI we've had has been racist, ableist, sexist, and has a lot of assumptions within it, and including the language models like Chat GPT, right? So inequalities we know of is biased data sets. I think they are trying to diversify data sets, but like the internet, it is mostly white, Western, English content, and that automatically makes it biased in the way knowledge is, in general is biased, right? It's inaccessible in some locations. So in Egypt, it's officially not available. The company won't officially allow it in Egypt and a few other countries. There are ways to get around that, but it's not officially available. So not everyone has access to that. It reproduces some oppressions. Historically, we know facial recognition has not been good at detecting Black faces. We know that in criminal justice, AI in the US has been reproducing discrimination against African Americans. We know search engines are biased. So we already know this about all the AI we've had before. And also a lot of the AI is extractive, right? It learns from us and it takes our data without our permission really, or, not really aware of the permission. And then it sells it back to us and asks us to pay for it, right? And the other thing to think about is, one of the things that educators are worried about is that the AI writes like a student. It's because we've been asking students to write like robots. So it's an opportunity for us to rethink the way we ask students to do things, the kinds of assessments we ask them to do. Because we ask them to write things that look like essays, but without a lot of soul, right? So of course the robots are good at doing that because that's what they are. The other thing that I think is also important if we're going to do this kind of thing, wolf in sheep's clothing. I think OpenAI as a company has produced an AI that tries not to reproduce bad language and violence and things like that. But I don't know if you all know this story that came out in Time magazine that in order to do this, they outsourced to a company in Kenya where the workers were first underpaid, but also they had to look through a lot of violent and content that challenged them mentally. And when they had mental health issues, the company didn't support them through that. So in order to create an ethical AI, there was a lot of unethical practices happening in the process. And that's a really important thing to discuss with learners. And so one of the things you could do is do what Donna Lonclaw and Laurie Phipps suggested, which is ask students to write an acknowledgement statement of the human sacrifice that went into the creation of something like Chat GPT, right? But the thing that I want to talk about the most is how can we use AI to support metacognitive learning? So I would say support transparency in students. So first of all, ask them when they use AI to let us know how they've used it, where they've used it, but also to be transparent about their process. I've learned from my students that they do this cocktail of AI where they write something, they search Google and they do something on Chat GPT, then they put it through Quillbot to paraphrase, and then they put it all together and they stitch it. And so as they talk through this, they can see where are the gaps in their knowledge, where something might go wrong. And I get to learn how they use it to help them think more critically about how they're using it. I agree with Sarah Elaine Eaton that we will reach a point possibly of a post-plagiarism era in the future where you'll not be able to determine what was written by AI and humans. But at the moment, I think we can do this. I do think the definitions of plagiarism will probably be transcended by what's happening with AI. I don't agree with every single thing she said, and I'm going to put a link to this article because I don't have time to talk through all of it. But I do think there will still be biases, there will still be language issues. I think we need to be careful about the human creativity where it can be enhanced and where it can be limited by the use of AI at certain stages of the process where it can stop you from thinking deeply and long enough to actually reach something more creative than what the AI can do, because the AI is not going to create something that's completely unoriginal that's never been heard before. I think it's important to help learners figure out how AI learns. And so I use these 3 games. Quick Draw, if you've never used it, helps them understand how pattern recognition works. The real or fake text one is a really interesting one. And there's one about real or fake photos. There are faces that are not real. And so they get to experience how AI works so that they understand it. The other thing that I think is really important is to think about, in general, historically, I think we do not automate the things we care about. And so are we offering students assessments to do things about things they care about? Are they making those mistakes of using AI for the things they should be caring about and therefore expressing less care for things that they should be caring more about? So you don't want to be using AI to write a letter to your husband or something like that about something really important, I hope. But I've heard that people are starting to do that. I've seen my students, when I've given them choices of assignments to do, when they like the topic, they write in very personal language, and I know it's their personal reflection. When they don't like the topic, I can clearly see that it's been written with AI help. And when I've asked them to disclose that, and it's true that they do use AI with it. So I've seen that happens. And so it's very important to make those delineations and discussions with students, like what is okay to automate and what is not okay to automate. And so I think it's also important to respond to all these advances with care, both to teachers and to students. So it's in my institution, we've been supporting teachers with community conversations And taking that stance of supporting learners' critical AI literacy, that some of the things that Michael talked about, what are the limitations? Where can it be useful? And not take that catch and punish lens, which I understand from the previous webinar was things people talked about. And addressing these inequalities in AI, including the digital literacy differences between people who don't know how to use prompts, which I think Bron is going to talk a little bit about that in her part. And just this never automating what we care about. And supporting students with the advent of it relates to building trust with students rather than suspicion, especially that I know in the professional world now, a lot of people are using AI in different ways for productivity, encouraging students to support each other through the process, and including students in those conversations about what institutions will do. So what kind of guidelines are going to happen? Where are students there to make those judgments? And sharing between educators about how they're using it so they can inspire each other. And my institution has collected some of what our professors are doing, if you'd like to check those out. And another thing that I'm going to do with my students very soon is there's an article that has the speculative futures of AI, has positive and negative futures from people from all over the world, like 40 authors or something. And what I'm going to do with my students is I want them to imagine what the future of AI is. So I'm going to let them read a couple of these and then write their own. And the thing is about fiction is that it's sometimes, if these students in some form in the future will themselves be working on AI, whether as programmers or in the social world, then they will have started to imagine the future that they want the AI to take, right? Rather than accept the future that the AI brings us by people like Musk and whoever else is working on this. The other thing I wanted to share, if you've never seen this, there's a collection of Christina Ranci and a few others collecting creative uses of AI in education. If you want to take a look at that, it's crowdsourced by people from all over the world as well. And I know I went really, really fast with this. So tell me in the chat, what's a key takeaway for you? I'm not going to use Slido for this, just so that you can just type in the chat for as long as you like. And I'm going to put a link to my slides again. Am I in time? Am I good with time?
Perfect. Yes. Thank you so much. I loved your quote. We're worried that AI can write like students because we've been asking students to write like robots. I think that's fantastic. And also your observation that students are using a cocktail of AI. They're already navigating their way around multiple systems actually to think critically about topics and kind of deepen their learning. So I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Maha. Up next, we do have Bron, Dr. Bron Eager, joining us from Australia. So over to you, Bron.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. So I want to take you through a really applied kind of mini case studies about how I've been using this. And if I haven't met you before, I am coming to you from Australia. And those of you who have met me know that I am a bit of a fangirl of AI and love playing with it. It's the weekend's about to start, which means my student work is on hold and I get to play with AI for 2 days straight. But what I want to run through today is everyday AI, which is kind of using it for in my classroom and in my teaching practice. And then fingers crossed that it works, because you can never trust that AI or Chat GPT is actually going to run when you want it to. I want to run you through a demonstration of using it and the power of prompts to actually get good things out of AI, and then a worked example of some feedback that I played with last weekend, because things are moving really, really fast. So I did notice that there are a few people in the chat that haven't used Chat GPT before, and if you haven't, it's a totally free class. It's about 30 that I put together, which was entirely made using AI. So it's all Chat GPT generated scripts, translating into text to AI video to explain you and walk you through how to use it to generate things for your classroom. So you can do lesson plans, case studies, rubrics, assessments, activities, all sorts of things. But what I'm finding is that how well those things can be done and the quality of them really depends really highly on the prompt or the instruction that you give Chat GPT to work with. And what I am finding is that people will often go to it with high high expectations of what it can give them without actually giving ChatGPT the nuance or the context or the layers of information that you would give. Like Michael was saying, that if you asked someone to write you a lesson plan to teach a topic, they would probably ask you, well, give me some more information so I can tell you exactly what I want you, what it could recommend. But if we go across to ChatGPT and start a new chat, typing a prompt like that, write a lesson plan to teach, and I teach entrepreneurship, so I put in entrepreneurial mindset. It is going to tell me exactly what I need to be doing, but it's going to be telling me a whole lot of things that aren't really relevant. So I don't teach high school students. I may not have computers or handouts in the actual room. And some of the information really isn't tailored to what I want, or the value of the goodness that can come out of it. So when I'm writing prompts, I actually write a huge amount of information in order to get the output that I'm after. So some things that you could include are like, what is the audience, the characteristics of the audience, a deeper understanding of like, what is the topic? How deep do you want to go the topic? What is it that you want to actually engage the students with? What do you want them to do? What is the presentation format? Is it going to involve group activities or individual activities? And what are some of the resources that you have available to you? So rather than make you wait for me to type out that whole prompt, it's like a cooking show. I've prepared one earlier. So this is the sample prompt that was in the slides, but with all the information that I would want. And then it's going to give me something that is much more customized to what I'm after. But it still might not be 100% what I'm after. So what you can do is actually, it's a very conversational, it's called chatbot, because you can have a chat with it. So I might look at that and say, yeah, that's kind of okay. But it's still a bit boring. I want to do, it's an entrepreneurship class. I want to do something super exciting. So then I can feed it more information in order to, for it to give me another suggestion as to what it might come up with. It's come up with, I'm putting marshmallows in my class now, which is an entrepreneurship activity, which is quite fun. So the takeaways that I'm kind of trying to communicate with that is that the goodness, or using it for a force of good, involves actually learning how to instruct it well. So good prompts is going to get you good outputs. And I think one of the keys in taking everyone along the Chat GPT or the AI journey is about educating, firstly, the educators as to how you can get the most out of the technology, so that then that can disseminate down into educating students about how to do the same, and using it as very much a conversation and a back and forth. So some of the chat sessions that I have can go on pages and pages and pages of iteration backwards and forwards. It's my assistant. And very quickly, I just wanted to run you through, I use it for student feedback as well. Now, I don't cut and paste student work into kind of copyright and permission issues surrounding that. But what I can do is I can copy and paste my own feedback in, and then I can ask it to rephrase the feedback that I've created, so that sometimes maybe it's not as clear as it could be, so I can get it to make it clearer. I can try and enhance the accessibility of the feedback. I have a lot of students, English is a second language, so I can specifically ask it to give me feedback that might be interpreted better. And I can make my feedback more formative as well. So I can ask it to reword it to make it more specific or more actionable for the students. So try to improve the quality of the feedback that I'm giving. The other thing that I did as an experiment on the weekend was I broke my feedback down into what kind of components of the feedback am I giving, and it follows kind of a recipe of like, hello with the student's name, this was the purpose of the assignment, explain how the grade was calculated, let them know that they can seek additional feedback by contacting with me, and then a sign off of like, thanks. And so I broke this down and created a prompt for each single one, which I then asked ChatGPT to generate. And for each of those generations, I asked to generate the number of iterations for the number of students I had in the class, cut and paste it into an Excel file. And then because my Excel skills were lacking on the day, I didn't know how to then string it all together. So then I actually used ChatGPT as an instructional tool for myself in order to learn how to combine all the cells into individual feedback, which I could then use as a draft and then tailor to meet the needs of the student. I don't have time to necessarily go over Zara, but she's an AI generated video assistant that I use in the classes, and I generate ChatGPT scripts and then innovate on those and then use an AI software. And she's at the start of each unit and she tells a little story by applying the content. And in the 2 seconds I've got left, I just wanted to share some of the amazing things that you can do with it. And this is a book that I created in an afternoon, pretty much using ChatGPT to generate prompts for how to use ChatGPT for all different scenarios of academic writing. And the key to it was actually coming up with the initial prompts to generate it. And then that was being able to be put on the Kindle's Amazon store, and it went to a #1 bestseller in education research within 2 days. So thank you, ChatGPT. And I think I've gone way over time. I'm so sorry, Eve.
Not a problem. Thanks, Bron. That was super helpful, and it is just extraordinary, the sort of what is possible with these tools. And I think that the idea that the prompts, you actually have to do quite a lot of critical thinking about a topic in order to be able to write a prompt that gets a good output, shows that students, in order to use these properly, do need to do the sort of authentic engagement with the topic themselves, unassisted first. This is just a reminder for everyone, if you've got questions for panelists, please do put them in the chat as we go, and we will be sort of rounding them up in the Q&A afterwards. But finally, we can't properly get to grips with this area and this topic without hearing from students and student representatives in the process. So to give us a student perspective on how we use ChatGPT as a force for good, we have the brilliant Jack Medlin from Keele Students' Union offering us his student perspective. So take it away, Jack.
Thank you, Eve. So share these. So as we said, I'm Jack Medlin. I'm the Education Officer at Keele University Students' Union, coming from a very gloomy Stoke-on-Trent today. And like we've said, it's not just practitioners who are very excited about AI and who are using AI, it's also students. So the first conversation we ever had around AI is a lot of people just thought students would use generative AI and other AIs to cheat, but I don't think that's the case. Generative AI can be, should be, and importantly will be a force for good for students. There's absolutely no situation that I can see that students won't be using AI en masse and aren't already using it. And students will only get more creative with their uses as an understanding towards AI is built. Students, as opposed to some people's views in society, are curious and passionate about learning new skills, and this might actually be one of the most important developments of the decade. So some of the ways I can see students using it and that they're already using it is to, first of all, level the playing field around academia. So When I say this, Chat GPT and other AIs can support where typically in the past students have had a lack of support. So looking at, say, first generation students who may have little to no understanding of the structure of academic writing or how to do academic writing, students whose first language isn't English can now get things like proofreading without a cost of having to pay a professional reader. ChatGPT also does great jobs at automating some of the more mundane tasks that students see. So it's great at serving a great basis for initial searching and understanding of topics and the literature behind them. Instead of being students being stuck not knowing where to go, they can now summarize and find relevant articles all at the press of a keyboard. And it can also give them potential questions or avenues that students can explore, leading to more novel knowledge development for our students. It reduces the need for predatory services such as essay mills and professional proofreaders. We just need to start to focus our realignment of terms such as academic integrity and plagiarism, which we've spoken about already so far, and work to embed the use of AI programs, both within the skills that we expect our students to graduate with, but also in our assessment design. And like I said, there's no way that ChatGPT can be a force for good for students. Students are already using it and will use it. So let's delve into some of the things that I've already noticed students using it for. So like I said, developing an understanding of the topics and literature. ChatGPT and other generative AI continue to grow in strength in terms of breaking down complex topics and providing relevant literature to form the basis of assessment. There's no need to pay to proofread now. Students can use it to check for spag and general readability. And it also provides really useful suggestions to improve both safely and for free, which really helps students build their knowledge from day one all the way until they graduate. One of the unique ways I've actually found students using it are to navigate the etiquette and unwritten rules in academia. So the unwritten professionalism of academia can be daunting to a lot of students, especially for me. I found it a nightmare to email my lecturers when I started, but ChatGPT can write formal, structured emails and messages with ease, breaking down that worry for students and actually probably meaning they'll actually be more likely to reach out to professionals and academics and staff. But also it's really useful in exploring beyond the formal curriculum and also helping students develop new skills. So we just heard from Bron then talking about how she used ChatGPT to teach her how to use Excel functions. And ChatGPT suddenly opens a world of new concepts and topics in a student-friendly way, all at the press of a keyboard. Beyond these, students will be using these to develop in their extracurricular activities as well. So I can see students using AI to plan events for their societies and their sports clubs, to develop covering letters, CVs, job applications. There's absolutely no end to the ways that this will be used. And I think as higher education providers, we have a duty to upskill our students to support this exploration. So how can students support them? So one of the biggest things that we've talked about so far is the importance that prompts have when it comes to effectively using AI. So as part of our key and core academic skills support that we're giving to students, we should really think about starting to embed prompt engineering into this. Obviously, ChatGPT needs to be taught how to answer questions effectively, and we should upskill graduates to do this because ultimately employers are going to expect this from students in the next decade. We shouldn't be reactionary. We shouldn't ban AI. I'd argue you can't ban AI, but I think the good thing is the sector seems to understand this. Detection tools will disproportionately impact students from widening participation backgrounds, as open source versions typically don't have the most up-to-date features. And then it's a case, and also when you're looking at things like detection, it's often open source AI providers that will be the training for those detection tools. So you've got people that can pay for the latest versions of AI that won't be detected, whereas the students that can't afford to pay for that will be disadvantaged in that case. We've also spoken about the need to have honest, open and frank conversations with students about AI. What are they using it for already? Where do they see their future needs being? And how can we support them in achieving this? I think the really important thing that we've seen so far is highlighting all of this in a culture of trust. We need to trust that we need to acknowledge that our students are already using this. We need to have them trust us to have these conversations, and we shouldn't see it as anything that's punitive. I think this is a great time for providers that haven't already to reach out to their students and their students' unions, guild or associations to work on a really meaningful project which will have significant impacts on students today, tomorrow, and for years to come. Ultimately, the important thing to know is that we're venturing into the unknown, and this is actually quite scary for students, but it's also really, really exciting from my perspective, and it's been keeping me up most nights. Students are only beginning to learn what they can use AI for, and like I said, it's our duty to support them in doing so in a structured and empowering environment. We need to look at our assessments and how we can build these new skills in our students as part of the process, just like how decades ago using a calculator or a PC or even PowerPoint was seen as this new revolutionary thing. That's AI now. And these are skills that our future employers will want in the labour market, and it's skills that we should be embedding in our student. I'm really proud of my institution. We've been doing some great work looking at creative embedding of AI in the curriculum led by our Institute for Innovation and Teaching Excellence. And I just implore every provider to start having those conversations with students, and not just necessarily speaking to students' representatives, because often I haven't studied a degree in over 2 years and I don't know what it's like to actually use AI to write an assessment or whatnot, but actually speaking to students at the forefront of those who are actually using tools like this. Like I said, we're unlocking a new era of digitalization, and I think ultimately we need to bring students, academics, employers, and the public together to decide what to do. There is no running away from the fact that we are at the revolution of AI, and we can't really hide from it, and it's not something that's going to stop, and it's only something that's going to grow and grow more exponentially. So now's the best time to be having those conversations with students to make sure that students feel safe and supported, an environment that they can trust. It's important that we teach students that they need to acknowledge the limitations that AI has, and also, like Bali said, that we need to acknowledge the sacrifices that were made to get to where we're at now in terms of AI. But we do need to speak with our students and to ensure that they feel supported, that they feel like their needs are being met, and that they actually, because ultimately they're the next generation. So yeah, speak to your students about AI. That's really the take-home message of this. I did rattle through that really rapidly, but hopefully that'll lead to more times for questions. But yeah, thank you for listening.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jack. And I loved your point about how ChatGPT can support students' understanding of like the hidden curriculum, the sort of academic etiquette point I thought was fantastic. So we have about 12 or 13 minutes left probably for some questions. So my colleague Helena has been keeping an eye on the chat. Helena, what questions do we have to kick off with?
Yeah, I'd start by saying there's been a lot of love for all the presentations in the chat, a lot of spot on, great, best thing I've heard on AI so far. So that's great to hear. There's been quite a few questions around equity and access to AI tools. So is it a case of kind of privileged students getting supported by humans, less privileged students getting supported by AI, and the least privileged getting no support at all? What about paywalls? Would we expect libraries to provide access to them? And if it's great for using work, what about the students who don't have access? Should they just not be allowed to graduate, which is a bit more of a provocative one? So if we want to kick off with them and encourage anyone else, if they've got any questions, to still stick them in the chat, because we should have time for some more.
Fantastic. So Maha, do you want to take that first, and then maybe I'll come to Jack, and then if others want to pitch in, then please do.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that question is a question we have to keep asking ourselves all the time, right? Who has access? Not only, so this is a thing that we always forget. We ask who has access, which is easy to determine, right? Because sometimes it's a matter of cost, or it's like banned in a country or whatever. But there's also who is able to do the prompt engineering that Bron was talking about well. So just giving people access to a thing doesn't mean they know how to use it well. And the other element of, oh, but what about the higher quality human support that they may lose if they think, if we just offer people that, and then only the ones who can afford that. So I think those are questions we're going to have to keep asking, but all the time. Like never feel like you've reached where you are. And then also talk to students about it, like Jack was talking about, like always involve them, because they will reveal things that we don't notice on our own when we're just thinking about it from afar.
Yeah, thank you. Jack.
And the cultural element, the cultural element also. Like, is the AI making them all sound the same on their emails so that they don't have their own voice and they don't have their own personality? And do they start to feel like having my own personality doesn't matter in order to be professional?
Thank you. Jack.
Yeah, so coming into this, like I said, the first thing I've written down here is we can't take the human out of everything. Now that we've got AI, it's important to teach both students that they can be human, they can be themselves, but also we shouldn't be taking the human aspect out of the support that we're giving to students. We shouldn't suddenly be generating the warnings that we send to students using AI, and we should keep a human tone in those. I think in terms of investment, if we do see a further move to, I guess, more closed sources of AI that aren't open access, we do need to start having conversations about ensuring there is sufficient investment in licenses to ensure that it's not just the richest students that have access to these. All students should have access to these tools. I do think the revolutionary aspect is the support it does give to students who don't have those traditional support structures. So looking at first generation students, care experience students, I think that's where a lot of the revolutionary positive impacts it will have in terms of widening participation and whatnot.
Fantastic, thanks, Jack. And Bron and Michael, any reflections on those questions?
Just a very practical one from me in that from a Jisc perspective, we're keeping an eye on what we need to make available through licensing, because we're very conscious of the fact that there is a two-tier mechanism at the moment where those that have got paid access to Chat GPT plus have got better access than others already. So we're just keeping an eye on that and we'll take action when the time's right.
Thank you. Bron, anything to add?
Just that Microsoft announced Copilot across the entire 365 suite, which my university provides Microsoft products to the students. So it'll be interesting to see, and I haven't heard anything as yet, whether that just becomes it's available for everyone at the university or all students.
Yeah,
sure.
it's not clear yet on the licensing. They've not announced whether we're going to get it in education for free or for extra cost.
Great, thank you. Helena, what do we have next question-wise?
Yeah, so we've had a couple questions around kind of the future of AI, and as it keeps growing and growing, particularly in light of environmental and energy costs, how do we prevent ourselves and others becoming overly dependent? And also, what are the panelists' thoughts on Elon Musk's open letter calling for a moratorium on generative AI? And then if people want to answer some different questions, there's also, they're coming in thick and fast. There's also ones around how we make our assessments AI proof and how people respond to AI written text as well, if panelists want to take one of those instead.
Interesting. Who wants to kick off, and which question would you like to offer thoughts on?
Can I just answer the AI proof one?
Yes, please. Yeah,
So
okay, cool.
my take on that one particularly, first of all, this is changing like every day, right? But I think make that learning be the actual thing that the students actually do, a real thing, an authentic thing. Make the students go out into the world and do interviews with real people, or go into a community, or, you know, address a real problem and try to solve it. And then the writing is the way to write it up. So whether or not they use AI becomes less important. So it's not, writing is important in itself, in and of itself, and it's important as a thinking process. But beyond that, we're actually trying to solve problems in real life. So hopefully students are actually learning something that they will do in life. And I think when they're doing an authentic problem that they care about, that they know a real audience might benefit from, to whatever extent you can do this in your teaching, then whether or not they use AI doesn't become the question. Don't fixate on making it AI proof as much as how do I make this a meaningful assessment for students so that they want to do the research and that they want to do the work, then they'll write about it however they want. This is my take on that.
Thanks. Jack, what were your thoughts
Yeah,
there?
no. So my first thought is, for the most cases, I don't think you should make a assessment AI proof. I think there obviously a need to understand that students should develop an understanding of their subject, but kind of growing on what was just said then, we should be focusing in terms of assessment, looking at new knowledge generation and practical applications of knowledge, because those are things that AI can't do so well. I'd be wary to say to providers that they should just start to engineer the use of AI out of assessment, and we should actually probably build it in more creatively, because ultimately people are going to use AI in their employment, so we should be teaching them to do it effectively.
Thank you. Helena, were there other elements of those questions that we haven't answered? There was one about dependence on AI, was there?
Yeah, so whether we're going to just become overly dependent on it and the environmental and energy impacts of that, and and the Elon Musk moratorium question has had a few upvotes if anyone does want to tackle that one.
Bron, go for it.
I'll take that, because someone sent me a tweet this morning going, they're trying to stop the rapid advancement of it. And I was like, yes, please, because I think we all need some sleep, because it's just been advancing so much. We need some time to catch up.
Yeah, for sure. Michael, any thoughts on
Yeah,
Musk?
I'll just pick up on a bit of the detail. So it's a very strange letter if you read it. It's come from a group that are worried about long-termism, so they're worried about the far future, and that the AI, they refer to it as intelligent minds, which is not helpful. I think that from my perspective, we've got lots of important things today to discuss, and the kinds of things we're talking about today. Thinking about the AI we have as an intelligent mind that's going to get out of control is probably not where we need to be at the moment. So some of the letter in terms of regulation and things, absolutely. Us all getting worried about it taking over the world, no.
Nice, perfect. That's what we want to hear. So Helena, I think, can we maybe pose one final question and then pose it to all of the panel in the time that we have left?
Yeah, actually a really interesting one's coming with a bit more of a research than teaching focus that says, how does the panel see the impact of AI on the publish or perish imperative for academics, and the impact on the culture of writing as a product, and the impact on peer review process?
Ooh, who wants to take that first? Bron, go for it.
I'll go with that as well. I can see that it's going to be a two-track world in the near future, where you have AI-assisted academics amplifying their abilities at the moment and publishing more, producing more work. And I think that we have a responsibility to not abuse that as well, because it's not a level playing field, and it's going to lift everything up and the expectations up, and we're in a danger of tripling or quadrupling our workloads rather than using the AI to buy our time back. So it's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you.
I was in a session recently where someone talked about AI being used to help editors identify the best peer reviewer. So that could be useful, because sometimes I'm asked to review things that I'm not an expert at. So maybe if the editors can get a little bit of help with that, that's a good thing. But I definitely don't want to write an article myself and then have a peer reviewer use AI to review it, I guess. That feels problematic. But yeah, I agree with Bron that we need to not abuse that, whatever amount of support that we get from this. And maybe we should stop counting papers and start doing meaningful research and just getting one publication out of it, because that's another thing.
Nods and applause for that point there. Jack and Michael, anything that you wanted to add on that?
From my perspective, I think it'll be interesting on seeing how it helps students navigate research and actually having research outputs as part of their undergrad program, especially because often we're seeing now it's typically mostly the most privileged students that have the ability and the access to actually have, say, their final year projects published. But as it becomes more open to more students, we actually might see more students actually having some form of research output as part of their degree.
Really interesting, thank you. Any final words from you, Michael, before I wrap up?
Not on that note.
A chance. Perfect. All right, brilliant. Thank you so much all. That does bring us to the end of the webinar. Thank you so much to our 4 brilliant speakers who have taken the time to prep and be here today, and to everybody who has attended. I really hope that it was useful to you. Remember, we have one final webinar in this series that's happening after Easter on the 18th of April at the earlier time of 10 a.m. That one is called Chat GPT, What Should Assessment Look Like Now? And I know that there were lots of questions in the chat about that, so please do register for that and join us for that on the 18th of April. If you're a member of QAA, you also have access to a whole host of resources and guidance on the membership resources site that can support you and your provider in things like assessment design, authentic assessment design, and promoting academic integrity. If you're not sure whether your institution is a member, you can check that out on our website. And if you're not a member but would like to be, please do reach out to us on the email membership@qaa.ac.uk. That's membership@qaa.ac.uk for a conversation about what membership might be able to do for your organisation. But that is all from us, I'm afraid. Finishing a little bit earlier, which is pretty impressive, really. And apologies for those who had to Zoom through their presentations, but we'll give you all sort of 3 or 4 minutes of your lives back. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your days and weekends when you get to it, if you're not already there.